6, Everett R. Rollball Hearing Room. Been joined by the Honorable Council members, Jose Huizar and Paul Krikorian. I thank the staff for their support and their hard work and their promptness. But as you know, we have members who are on other committees, and we're trying our best to start on time, but that doesn't always work out, so I thank you for your patience and cooperation. Today we have an agenda that I'm hoping we can move through rather efficiently, and there are quite a few consent items. And let me go through the agenda. I'll identify which ones will be called special due to cards and which ones will recommend for consent, otherwise, unless there are other items that my colleagues like to call special. But item number 1 we'll call special because of cards. Items 2 through 6, if agreed by my colleagues, we can move on consent. On 7, I have cards, but I need to share with you that we will be continuing this item to May 11th, and in council May 21st. So, Alexandra Sue from Kiwa, are you here, ma'am? We'll be continuing this item to May 11th. Do you still feel compelled to speak, or do you want to wait?
I would still like to speak.
You would? Okay, then we'll hold it for you. You made the trip to City Hall?
It's been continued.
It's been continued. So, would you like to stay for general public comment afterwards, so that we will open it up for the agenda on May 11th? But we're not going to engage it, we're going to continue it to May 11th.
I understand. And we will be here at that date as well, but I wanted to submit a comment today.
You want to submit a comment today? Want to do that in writing, then we can have the public hear your testimony on the 11th?
We have submitted something already.
Madam Attorney?
Terry Kaufman, Macias City Attorney's Office. Well, the concern is that the agenda specifically says it's been continued, so there are probably a number of people who aren't here today based on
Okay.
that.
So I want to honor the fact that you're here, so what we could do is we'll continue it, but you are able to speak to it in general comment? Can she do that, general public comment?
Well, I think that, yes, she could do that. It's just then we get into that due process issue, but she could speak on.
Okay, so we're going to continue it, and because of the fact that due process requires both sides to be heard at the same time, that we won't have public hearing today, but we will have general public comment at the end of the agenda. Okay?
Excuse me, ma'am, you should speak into the,
Why don't you come to the microphone, please, and give us your name? Then we can iron this out.
Sorry, I guess I misunderstood the process. I thought that public comment was accepted up until May 11th. Up until and including May 11th.
Now, in this committee, we have the public comment on the item when we engage the item, because then we have the discourse of 2 points of view.
I see. So is it or is it not possible to submit a comment today in addition to on May 11th?
If you want to submit something in writing, that's up to you. We're open to accept it, but I won't hear public comment on this item until we're going to hear it in front of us.
I see. Okay, I misunderstood the process.
Okay, no
Thank you very
problem.
much.
No problem. Okay, so we'll continue the item to May 11th. Item number 8 will continue to May 18th. Number 9 we'll call special due to cards. Number 10 will continue to May 11th and council the 21st. Item number 11 will have special. Item number 12 will be special. And we do have our director of the planning department, Gail Goldberg. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry I was late today, but I did want to just briefly tell you that last week I appeared in front of the Budget and Finance Committee, and we discussed the Planning Department's budget. And as I have told you in the past, I explained to them about moving our department from 100% general fund to 75% special fund. We talked about the loss of employees. And the one recommendation that came from the Budget and Finance Committee that would be, I think, of interest to you is that they did ask the CAO to look at the issue of reducing our vacancies by 40 people. Instead of getting rid of all of those positions, perhaps leaving some to give us flexibility for the future, unfunding, of course, so it would have no budget impact, but to allow us in the future the ability to have that flexibility if our revenues begin to come back. So I think that that was a positive response, and I'll keep you updated. I also told them that we were going to have limited ability in our general fund to do a lot of new general fund work because as our resources have dwindled and more of our resources are directed toward work that is fee-related, it's going to make it more and more difficult for us to do large-scale general fund projects, but we will continue to talk about that and find ways to add to our capacity. I did want to share with you that we are beginning a 2-month program in the Planning Department of training and cross-training planners throughout our department in terms of the full scope of planning work, environmental, we're having CEQA training for everyone, subdivision training for everyone, because July 1 we are implementing our GEO team reorganization. You will recall that this has been the recommendation of every audit that's ever been done of the department and has certainly been a recommendation that's come from you. And so we are going to fully implement our geographic reorganization. It will allow us to begin to process cases in a sort of cradle-to-grave strategy, so the same planner will take a case from the beginning to the end. I think that we will find efficiencies, and I think that it will give us a lot more flexibility in terms of our work program. We'd be happy at some later date to have Vince, who is our Deputy Director in charge of the reorganization, maybe give you a more detailed view of what it looks like. But the Planning Department wants to take advantage of this opportunity, if you will, of loss of resources and a down economy to really make structural changes that we believe will also have an impact on sort of the culture of planning in Los Angeles.
I think it's critical that the morale of the staff is such that they understand we're doing our best to establish an environment where they can be as efficient as possible, knowing that across the board, every department is going through a tremendous stress in this reorganizational transition that we're going through as a city. And the planning department, I believe, is one of the key departments that deals with our ability to implement our vision for the future of the city, but also understanding the planning police powers we have and trying to create a good environment for a growing city. So I look forward to working with you, understanding more what the reorganization means, and finding ways in which we can bring in the type of support that is needed not only from the mayor's office, but from my council colleagues and the stakeholders who depend on the discretionary measures that are allowed in this planning process. So thank you for your hard work. I look forward to understanding that.
And I appreciate very much the support that this committee provides us.
Any questions, my colleagues, for the director? Okay, well, thank you so much, Gail. Okay, so let's get to item number 1. We have several cards on this item. And if we can have the planning staff come forward. Nick, if you can speak into the microphone. And the folks out in the audience, you can hear the acoustics are not the best. It's hard to decipher what's being said. So if you can take your discussions and your conversations outside, we would appreciate that very much, to allow the speakers to be understood and heard, given the acoustics we have in this room. So please identify yourself, sir.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Kevin Jones. I was a hearing officer that was assigned for the preparation of the staff report. What you have is a request for a specific plan exception that has been transferred to the city council's jurisdiction for them to make a determination on their request. The request for the specific plan exception is from the Venice, or from a section of the Venice Coastal Zone specific plan, to permit a building that will have a height of 32 feet in lieu of 25 feet overall. This project has a very long history on it. It has been before, this entire project has been before the council before. But we are here as part of a different iteration of that, where they want to lower the height from the existing height of 33 feet 4 inches to a maximum height of 32 feet. The specific plan allows a maximum height of 25 feet for structures that have 25 feet overall. And
So they're back in front of us because, one more time, why?
because the West Los Angeles Area Planning Commission failed to act on the requests based upon our recommendation report. It was then, because they did not render a decision, the applicant requested a transfer of jurisdiction, so now it goes to this body to make its the actual first determination on the request for the specific plan exception. I conducted the public hearing back on December 15th, 2009. It was there was a number of speakers that spoke in support of the project. However, after considering the information that was contained in the staff in the case records, looking at and listening to the testimony that was submitted by the speakers there, the planning department could not make the recommendation and could not establish the findings necessary to grant the specific plan exception based upon the information that was contained in here. You will probably hear from the applicant about their position on why it should be granted. However, the reasons that they're asking for the exception really could not be fully justified in the findings that are necessary to be made to grant the specific plan exception. That was why on February 3rd, 2010, it went to the West Los Angeles Area Planning Commission. After considering that information, they chose not to render a decision in either direction, which is why it's now before the council for there to make the decision.
So they punted. Yes? Okay. Go ahead.
I guess I can't answer it, but they
No
weren't.
problem. Okay, I'm just,
I understand.
all right.
So this is the picture of the building that you have before you. As you can see in our staff report, it has been before the council on numerous occasions. There are at least 4 different cases that have considered this particular project. I understand that there are representatives from the Department of Building and Safety that want to speak to this project, or can speak to this project if you would like to hear from them. And there are also supporting staff from the Planning Department that can speak directly to the case where the Planning Department granted one exception. It's called a project permit compliance, where we allowed them a height of up to 30 feet. But yet and still, the project has resulted in a building that is now 33 feet 4 inches. But based upon the plans that we have, we understand where it should have been built to a certain height. We granted them that project permit adjustment, and the final building was not built to the standards that the city allowed them to build to. With that, since you do have a pretty full agenda and there are a number of people that wish to speak, I'll be glad to step off to the side or answer your questions.
How many violations are in front of us?
I don't know. That was really through the city attorney's office as to the number of items that are being prosecuted. I don't know the total answer. I also know that there are some other legal actions that are going forward that I can't speak to because I was not a party of those actions.
So not only is this in front of us because the local body chose not to make a decision, but there's also legal action of the city attorney against the applicant?
That is my understanding, but I don't know what those provisions are. this is where we're at. What I do want to focus upon is what is before this body and what's going forward.
No, I understand, but I'd like for us to understand the environment we're making. We understand the context
Correct.
of our decision.
That's correct.
And so we should be aware of what other actions are being taken by the city as a whole.
That's
I believe
correct.
it's important for the body here to understand the context.
Terry Kaufman, Messiah City Attorney's Office. I'm sorry, I'm not aware of criminal prosecution. I'm only aware of a civil action that is essentially stayed pending the outcome of this recent request.
Okay. All right.
So the photograph that you have in front of you shows the existing building in its current iteration. There is a proposal under this that he is going to lower it to a height of 32 feet, removing approximately 1.5 feet from the building that as it exists. However, in other actions and in the documents, the applicant has clearly outlined that it would be very expensive, since it is a steel structure that he used to construct this building, to lower the height. But that was something that the planning department was not able to fully take into account in making the findings for the specific plan, which are very precise.
Okay. Please.
And one thing I don't understand is how did this come to be? It sounds like it's a mistake, but how do you make that mistake when you're constructing this? When
I think that would be a question that's better directed at the applicant, since they submitted plans to the city that said that they were going to build to a specific height of 30 feet with a varied roof line. In light of that, we now have a building that is well over that height at approximately 33 feet.
And so the remedy is, what are you recommending?
We're recommending that we cannot make the findings to grant them a specific plan exception. What we're recommending is the denial of the specific plan exception and have the applicant make the corrections to the building to bring it into compliance with the dispensation of the project permit compliance adjustment that was granted to them in 2002-2003 and bring the height back down to 30 feet.
And that would require them to redo their building?
At least the top portion, and bring it into compliance.
Okay.
How many units are allowed on this lot?
The zone is already 1.5. According to the plans that they wanted to and what they were granted were, through various actions all through the city, they were granted 3 dwelling units.
And how many units are there today?
Based upon this information here, that they have 3.
Okay. Is building and safety here to speak to how we got here and what was responded to? How did we get here, in other words, from the building and safety point of view?
Why didn't somebody tell them, hey, you're not building to height?
Right.
Good afternoon, council members. Dave Lara with Building and Safety. This has been a long history of things that have gone on over the years. I've brought with me Mr. Senior Inspector John Kelly of our staff, who's very familiar with that, and he's here to answer your questions. So,
Yeah. I guess I'm trying to understand the facts. Is this the case where an applicant is told, these are the rules, these are the limits, and they just disobey it, or did we allow approval and they didn't? Was there a gray area here? I just want to understand how we got here.
It's a combination of both. Mr. Baez had permits to build 2 buildings on the lot. That's what was allowed by the zoning code.
2 structures.
2 structures. He built 3. Third one did not have a permit, and he was stopped by the department on December 31st, 2002 because of that 3rd building. He went to city planning for a ZA case a month later, and he lost. 2 months later, he lost in the commission. 2 months after that, he lost in the Plum Committee, but he won approval in the full city council in July of 2003. So there was a problem with having a permit for 2 buildings in Building 3, so there was a disregard. He eventually got the 3rd permit for the 3rd building based on the approval by the full City Council in July of 2003. And the construction continued and inspections continued by the Commercial Division until the final inspection, and pursuant to a height complaint from the neighborhood, a height survey was done, and it was done at first 5 feet outside the building, and it was over height, but it was brought to the department's attention that the height survey actually had to be, by virtue of the Venice specific plan, from the center line of the street. At that time, it was found out that the building was 3 feet 4 inches over height.
Wow.
So did we make a mistake in measuring initially, and did they follow our directions? No.
Well, they didn't follow any directions. They built 3 buildings. This was built in a very short time. This is a steel building that was just put together almost like an erector set. It came to the site, it was already fabricated, and it was just bolted together. Probably a team of iron workers put up a building in a day or 2.
So if we hadn't gotten any complaints, I mean, Building and Safety eventually would have gone out there and did it themselves.
They might have missed it, because apparently they didn't ask for a height survey at the outset of the job being transferred to the Commercial Division from the Residential Division.
But you wouldn't have gone out there and measured afterwards, after the completion of the project. There was no height survey required? I mean, there has to be a height survey required in order for you. Isn't it just
Typically, if there's any question, they ask for a height survey. Why they waited so long, I don't really know.
In your opinion, do you think this was an honest mistake, or does someone try to circumvent the rules?
I think that there was a certain amount of inexperience involved, maybe some negligence by the contractor. The site raises up 2 or 3 feet from the sidewalk, and they did no grading on the site. They probably should have taken the grade level down 3 feet, and they wouldn't be having this problem. But they didn't do that.
Okay.
Any other questions, council members? Okay, well, let's go through the hearing. Appreciate your insight. I do remember this case now. Well, it wasn't fun then either. Okay, we have for this Fred Gaines, representing Mark Bias. Mark Bias. And you're the applicants for
Yes.
the variance? Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, honorable members. My name is Fred Gaines with the law offices of Gaines and Stacy, here today on behalf of the property owner and applicant, Mark Baez. We are very appreciative of you taking the time to hear this case. It has a long history, and we are hopeful you can assist us in coming to a final resolution. I was hoping, Mr. Chairman, you might remember this. It did come to you 2 years ago when the height was first discovered. They came in for an exception to leave the building as it was, which comes to 33 feet 4 inches. And that ended up being denied. There was actually a debate at the council chamber that sort of went back and forth, and it ended up being denied. And one of the requests was, do what you can to lower this, to lower this building and come back with another application. And hence another application has been made, and that's what you have before you today. What we're asking for is to reconfigure the roof of this building to lower it from what is its current 33 feet 4 inches to 32 feet. And I've given you 2 handouts. One handout, by the way, is a stack. This is over 80 letters of support, and I started with the ones from right surrounding the building, the property owners surrounding the building. The other is this handout, and it shows what's being proposed on the roof of the building, what the originally approved roof was, what the revised roof is, and it shows the difference. And then it also shows you some photos of the building and of the steel construction. This is not a building where you can just take 2 feet off the top. It's a steel building. And we've, in the past, provided into the record estimates of $1.2 to $1.7 million to either deconstruct the building and grade it and put it back up, or to somehow lift the building up and dig underneath to save this couple of feet. Am I going to be limited to the 8 seconds?
Why don't you try to wrap up what you need to say?
What we have done is we've come back with, and I'm happy to answer your questions on how it happened, on the state of the cases, because there are cases that are pending where in both cases, civil and criminal, the judges have said, make another application and let's try and resolve this, and I'm happy to do that. If I'm going to be limited on time, here's what I want to get to. We came back with an application where we maintained this varied roof by putting this facade on top of the roof at a lower level. The lowest we can do it with that variation on the roof is the 32 feet. And we've gone to our neighbors, we've gone to the Neighborhood Council. The Neighborhood Council Land Use Committee voted not to oppose us. The Neighborhood Council Board did vote to oppose us. But we have a project where the immediate neighbors are not complaining. We've had one opponent at both the ZA hearing and the APC hearing. We have no issues relating to views or light or immediate neighbors. We've worked with the council office, and what happened here was very, very unique. We go to the APC, the West LA APC, which is not a body that has trouble making a decision, and how long have I been doing this, Mr. Chairman? 25 years I'm coming up on it.
Okay.
They didn't make a motion. They didn't know what to do. Literally, each of the 3 members there that night said, I don't like giving exceptions, but we shouldn't have to take down this building. There should be a way to resolve this. And so literally, no one made a motion. They didn't, no motion, no second, nothing. They didn't know what to do. And I can understand that, because you don't like giving exceptions. At the same time, what do we do in this situation? What we've done in this proposal, in order to keep the varied roof line, because the specific plan in this area says you're allowed 30 feet with a varied roof line, is we've redone this varied roof line. Unfortunately, it forces us to lose the solar panels. This is a building that is of the highest technology in terms of energy efficiency. With the solar panels, this building it is completely self-sufficient, has radiant heat in the floors, natural air. That was one of the purposes of this building. And by the way, another one of these buildings has since been built. They figured out the height issue after the first one and had no problem. So one solution is what we've done, is to keep the varied roof, because in working with planning and others, they said we got to keep that. Another solution is to take off that facade on top of the roof, and I've given you the photos of it, and leave it as a flat roof, and we can put the solar panels on top of the flat roof, and that lowers it even lower. So now we're down to 31 feet and a few inches. So that's another possibility, and the APC considered that possibility, but again decided not to take an action. So we are looking to try and solve a problem that's been around for a long time without tearing down this building. We are willing to look at the various options. The one we came to was one that we developed in coordination with the council office and talking to planning and building and safety and others, that the Neighborhood Council Land Use Committee, who had several meetings with them, and they seemed to come along with it. And that's how we came up with that proposal, but we're open to other proposals. Again, I know my time is up and I've gone over. I'm happy to explain how this problem occurs. I'm happy to explain the status of the other litigation, both of which are stayed pending the outcome of this application. We have a number of, Mr. Baez, who is the owner and the designer of the building, is here. We have a number of people here who are in support. Those who are in support, will you stand? These are all people here today to support the application from the Venice neighborhood and nearby. I don't know whether you want to take their testimony or how you want to handle it, but I wanted you to see that they were here.
I appreciate that. Okay.
And so I'm happy to answer any questions. The last thing, Mr. Chairman, is that I understand the hearing officer on the findings. We've provided a set of findings that we believe could be made in this case, given the circumstances, and those are in the letter that we sent to you. So we do think that can be supported in that way.
Thank you, Mr. Gaines. Mike Bias? It's up to him. He submitted a card. I want to make sure he has that option to speak or not to speak. It's up to him.
Hi, I'm Mark Baez, property owner of 709 Fifth Avenue in Venice. I'm sorry. Hi, I'm Mark Baez, property owner and designer of 709 Fifth Avenue in Venice. I would just like to say a couple of things in addition to what Fred said. I do have all of the neighbor support. I have not experienced any opposition. A couple of other things. There are a couple of other buildings in the area that have received exceptions for height. And also, any neighbor can actually build to 35 feet with their mechanical equipment today. I would also just like to say that the hardship that I have experienced along with my family has been detrimental, and basically the cost to this date to try to resolve this issue has exceeded the amount of the property and the cost of construction. So that's kind of where I am right now.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Are here, they're willing to waive their time, and unless you feel in rebuttal, I don't know if there's opposition here or not, but
I'll go through the cards and offer everybody a minute.
okay.
If they choose to speak of whatever's been said you agree with, you're welcome to say I agree with the previous speaker and give us anything more that you need to add, just to kind of get through this process. But I'm not sure who, some people mark this other and support, and I'm not sure who's who, so I'll just go through the cards really fast. Olivia Sachi, you support her? Do you feel compelled to speak? Okay, thank you. Mara Ruthie? You're fine? You don't have to. No, come on up if you have to speak. I was saying you don't have to speak if you don't want to.
Hi, thank you. My name is Mara Luthi, and I agree with everything that Fred Gaines and Mark Baez has said. I also just want to add that this property is very notable in the architectural community. It's been in many notable magazines like Dwell and Plenty. It's included in architectural tours, including a nonprofit locally uses it as its architectural noteworthy site. It's very known in the environmental and architectural community nationally and internationally. I just wanted to add that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Krista Taylor, anything new to add? No, I just got to support everything. Okay, thank you. Shahzad Dazalar, you okay? Want to come on up? Come on up. And I apologize for mispronouncing your name. Excuse your name and address, please.
In addition to the support of arguments that have been said, I grew up in LA, and it's really important for me to see that the representatives here reflect the values of having a clean city, clean air, and environmental sustainability. And it's important to me to come to my city and be able to see that we're moving in that direction. I just came back from Vancouver, and coming back to all this smog, I see this building as a representative of the people of Los Angeles, reflecting the importance of those values. So I hope that you guys could dig into your toolbox and move in that direction.
So you're inspired by Vancouver.
Thanks.
It's a beautiful place. Can you give us your name and address one more time?
Pardon?
Your name and address one more time.
Scheherazade Difsalar, 1159 Las Pulgas Place, Pacific Palisades, California, 90272.
Thank you, ma'am. Steve Tartaglia?
Hi, Steve Tartaglia. Thanks for us. I do support very much the height exception they're asking for. I'm a green caterer, and I really appreciate anything environmentally sound in the neighborhood. I live about 5 blocks away from them, and we're longtime friends. And I look forward to many, many green-related, environmentally social conscious parties that will go on in the future if this house is allowed to survive in its present incarnation. So I support all these efforts to that end. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Susan Darby, anything else you'd like to add?
Hello. I agree with everything that's been said in support of the building, and I just wanted to add there was a question as to whether this was an honest mistake in the building process, and I just wanted to add that Mark Baez is one of the most honest, conscientious, and responsible people I know, and I have known him for a couple years and am a longtime Venice community member. So,
Okay,
thank you.
John Parker? Beautiful. Very wise man. Thank you very much. Selena Solovgova? Okay. Thank you, Selena. Melissa Hall?
I agree and support all of it.
Ditto. Okay. Thank you. Ben Sharples?
Same. I agree and support.
Okay, great. Thank you, sir. Can I have the staff come on up, please? When you made your presentation, you stated that the findings will be hard to establish given the history of this case. And then we hear from Mr. Gaines that he's offering his findings, of course, and he has a reason for that, but given this process, what will be the repercussions of a building like this is allowed and the laws are not obeyed in this particular part of the city?
The problem is the way that I see it is that while the applicants and all applicants in every single project that we have for review, they prepare their findings as they would like for a decision maker to concur with. There are times, and in this case we did not concur with those findings as detailed as they may be. At looking at how we believe that the project should go forward for height, looking at the fact that not necessarily this iteration, but the fact that he was granted an adjustment for 30 feet, our specific plan exception process does not allow for the consideration of the items that he is alluding to, such as an error in construction. And in our hardship findings, that is not necessarily, since it is self-imposed, you should have built to the plans that you should have built, that you said you were going to, that is a self-imposed hardship. So I can't make those hardship findings in a case where, for a variety of reasons, they were not able to comply with what the city granted them the dispensation to do. Your lead-in is, what do you think what do you think should happen? The planning department has provided you with the findings or the reasons for the denial. You, as the other body, can consider things that are beyond what the planning department can consider. The practical nature of it, if you want to consider cost, that's something that is beyond what planning department can do.
Okay.
But that is the reason why, in this case, the person has asked for a transfer of jurisdiction from a body that could not make its decision, and it's now before you, a different body that consider other things.
Right. Colleagues, I guess from my point of view, I would move for denial for one basic reason. One is that I've been exposed to many cases in Venice for the past 10 years as chair of this committee, and for at least 15 years working in the planning department and my previous capacity as a planner with a previous council member. And Venice is a very tough place to regulate because of the eclectic nature of how its neighborhoods evolve and the engagement of the rich diversity that's there. And it's the specific plan that really tries to maintain a semblance of order and compatibility in how this neighborhood evolves. And I would suggest if we deny this, to allow the council member of the district to come up with a scenario where he feels he can sustain and maintain the environments he represents as a council member, but we give him that ability to make those exceptions himself as the elected official, and perhaps come up with a strategy of how he wants to deal with it. What I would hate to see happen, and I'm not here to judge Mr. Baez's character, whether it's by intentional or not, but I would hate to send a message to other developers, investors, that they can come into Venice and build structures that are not following the law or the code, and then say, oops, I'm sorry, and maybe I can get an exception, maybe I can do this, and create a whole other level of work and incongruence, if you will, given what the specific plan has to offer. And I would offer that in denying this case today, it still allows the council member to reverse it in council should he choose, but he can reverse it with the conditions that he feels are appropriate, and making sure he maintains, that flexibility. But I would like to leave that discretion to him, because eventually he's the one who's going to have to deal with every case that comes before us. But as a planning committee, I don't think we should be supporting projects that, for whatever reason, are in the face of it, willfully just flying in the face of the law. And that would be my position on this one.
I'll second that. And I just want to clarify, the difference between what the regulations say and what was built is how much?
The applicant was granted a discretionary action that allowed him a maximum height of 30 feet with a varied roof line. At this point, what the applicant is proposing is 31 feet 6 inches.
But how much was it built to? 30. Wasn't it built to 33?
Yes, it's currently built to 33 feet 4 inches.
In practical terms, what does that mean in terms of a structure or a building? I mean, what goes in that space?
Their proposal is to reduce the height by 2 feet. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, let me say, I was just thinking if it's a few inches, it's something else. But I wholeheartedly agree with the chair of this committee. I think we would set a dangerous precedent should we grant this exception, and then we have other individuals or applicants come in here and say, whoops, we screwed up, we made a mistake, but give us that exception. I think that is a slippery slope that I hope this committee or the city does not go down that path. There are things and available tools at the disposal of applicants before the construction of these projects. Should they not want to comply with the local specific plan, they could apply for variances and a number of other exceptions within before the applicant goes out and builds this thing. But I think I agree with you, Chair, that it would just set a dangerous precedent. And we see a number more of these cases coming to us, and we don't know what people are thinking. Was it an honest mistake? Was it they thought the rules were different? Construction people take that risk when they decide to build a building. We give them the rules, and we have our building safety people go out there and ask them to comply with those rules. But the risk is on the construction folks. It would be an undue burden on the city if we were to have to follow the path that's been laid out by the applicant on this to grant an exception. So I would second your approach. Thanks.
Councilman, any comments or observations?
I guess I have a couple more questions, if you don't mind, of Mr. Gaines. Can you talk a little bit more about why there was this discrepancy on the height measurement?
Yes. I was not involved, so I got to do sort of the forensic view of this. I came into this case last year, and I went back and talked to we talked to inspectors, we talked to the engineers, and I think two things happened. First of all, one of the key factor here, most of the discrepancy has to do with the fact that in this particular case, as opposed to under the normal code where you measure adjacent to the building, in this case, under the Venice specific plan, you measure from the center line to the street. And there's a difference in elevation between the center line of the street and the bottom. Now, when you go to the plans that are
Mr. Gaines, I'm sorry, before you go any further, are other specific plans in the city, do other specific plans set other baselines from which the height measurement is supposed to be given?
They do. There's a number of different
baselines. So the city has one frame of reference for how we measure the height of a building, and specific plans can change that.
That is correct. And,
go ahead.
And other ordinances. The Hillside Ordinance is a different way to do it. Different specific plans do it from the curb. They do it from the center line of the street. They do it from, there's a number of different ways to do it. This particular plan does it from the center line of the street. Okay. So the actual plans that are approved, stamped approved in this case, show the building 30, and it shows the bottom of the steel pillar to the top 30 feet, measures it right there. And then it has in the notes, which if you've ever seen the plans at the beginning, there's pages of notes, and part of the pages of notes are copies of the planning approvals, and the planning approval says height pursuant to specific plan. So first of all, I don't want to make excuses, because I agree with you. It's the owner's responsibility. We're not blaming anyone else, although you heard even Building and Safety, our toughest critics, say that this was inexperience. This was a contractor not knowing that the note that says do it by the specific plan means that it shows 30 feet on the plan means nope, you should have measured from the center line of the street. Those are mistakes that were obviously made in this case. I talked to the contractor. He had no idea that it should be from the center line of the street. He had a plan that showed 30 feet from the bottom to the top. So that's the anatomy of the mistake in this case. It was not a purposeful mistake. And so I understand not wanting to grant an exception. I do understand, and I understand the importance of this. We have a very messy case that's gone on for a long time. And what we've done is we've gone back in this community at the direction of the city council, who denied us the exception to keep it as it was. They said, try to come back with something better. And what we've done is we've gone through and we've tried to lower it as much as we can. We have worked with the neighborhood. One of the most amazing things, because I agree with you, Venice is a very tough neighborhood. So when's the last time you saw a Venice specific plan exception case? And I have no opponents at Plum. I had one at Mr. Jones's hearing. I had one at the APC hearing. I have none today. That's frankly amazing. You have none of the immediate neighbors who would actually be affected if this height, if this extra 2 feet or 1 foot 9 inches, if we take the other little thing off and put it flat, if that extra height blocks someone's view, block their sun and light, cause them some problem. And by the way, while this is one of the taller buildings in the neighborhood, the buildings in this neighborhood go from 12 feet to 33 feet. So, but I don't have any of that. And so what we've done at the
I really need you to answer this question.
So what we've done at the direction of the council is we've come back and we've done our work. The council office is not here today. We've been in constant contact with them, and I hate to speak for the council office.
Is the council office, can I ask a quick question? I'm sorry to interrupt you. Does the council office have a position on this matter before us?
The council office took no position at the APC, and what they told us coming today, and I thought they were going to be here, I mean, we were in contact with them as of 2 hours ago, frankly, was that they had, if there wasn't community opposition in any significant way, that they did not have opposition of trying to resolve this case, which has been on their plate for years.
My point of view, I mean, I lived the first round of this case. And Councilman Rosendahl was passionate about all the environmental elements. And we were able to reach a certain understanding, and there was a give and take, if you will. But now we find ourselves back again, dealing just with the height. And for me, what's different this time is that this is precedent setting for that area and that specific plan. I believe we need to support to the degree that we can, given the difficulty and how that area is evolving with all of these different challenges that it has. So from my point of view, I would hate to set a standards of the committee to allow for this precedent to be set, because I can see in the future more applications coming in, more projects, and they're saying, oops, I'm sorry, I built it with steel, it's too expensive to take down now. And the specific land loses its integrity. But between now and council, the councilman of that district will have an opportunity to weigh in, and I will respect his decision. But from a process point of view, and from just the principle of the law and planning, it's hard for me to support what you're asking, and I would deny, again, I would stick with that. And I appreciate what you're saying. Believe me, I do. I know it's a very emotional case, and I lived it 8 years ago, and it was a very hard, difficult process, given the subjective factors and given what's real and the implementation and the impact that those decisions have had in that area. It has not made it any easier to try to establish this notion of compatibility in a very diverse, eclectic neighborhood that continues to change. So I would want to give the planning department and the council member of the district a base to work with, and if he decides to go differently, that's his discretion. I respect that. But right now, I'm really focused on what precedent we're setting. This is a height issue. It's pretty cut and dry, and we need to move on. And Councilmember, it's up to you, whatever. I'm throwing the softball at you here.
Yeah, well, I don't know if it was a softball. I thought that was the high, hard one, actually. That was the brushback. From my perspective is yes, we're all concerned about drawing exceptions to specific plans because of the precedent that may affect. But the reason for having specific plans in the first place is to take into account the specific needs of each individual community and retaining the character of each individual community. And we have a situation here where the community seems almost uniformly to be supporting the granting of this exception. So I'm concerned that we may be putting form before substance if we were to deny this exception, especially because, as Mr. Gaines started to say, that what the height did not do, it doesn't block views and so on. What you didn't say is what the height does, and that is generates renewable electricity, because that height variance accommodates the solar panels on the roof. So, I on the natural, I would be inclined to say this is one of those situations where it sounds like, the community concerns have been met, and I would be willing to grant this exemption. But in deference to Mr. Chairman, your discussion about your history on this particular project, that gives me great pause, because I want to be respectful of the process that you've gone through, the process that this committee has gone through, assurances that were made, all of that which was long before my time. So for purposes of today, I'm willing to go along with your recommendation for those reasons, but I think on the substance of it, I'm concerned that failing to grant this really does tend to put form before substance, and it would cause, I think, something that would be harmful not just to this building owner, but to the surrounding community and to the cause of trying to encourage more renewable energy and a better environmental standard in our construction of new buildings. So I'm willing to go with that today, with the understanding that when it comes back to council, Councilmember Rosendahl, the building owner, will be able to weigh in, and we'll have we'll review it de novo, if you will.
There you go.
Okay.
That's my hope too.
Okay.
So that'll be the action of this committee. And that'll be to really clear, to deny the specific plan exception, to reduce the height of an existing two-story, 33-foot, 4-inch high, 3-unit apartment building to a maximum of 32 feet, located at 709 Southwest Avenue, as requested by the applicant, Mark Baez, Fred Gaines representing. And a lot could happen between now and council, so thank you very much. Our next item, Roberto?
Next item, council members, is item 9, is an appeal for Hollywood Motors Corporation, and there's two appeals, and an appeal by a Mr. Samra. They're appealing the action of the Planning Commission relative to a conditional use for a buyback center in CD3.
Councilmember Reyes, members, I'm Daniel Scott, Department of City Planning. In October of 2009, the City Planning Commission approved a conditional use permit to allow a recycling center in the C2 zone on the subject site. This approval was subsequently appealed by two separate parties. In order to address some of the points of the appeal, I personally visited the site on March 18th and spent more than 2 hours observing the overall configuration of adjacent uses, which includes Hollywood Motors and 7 small businesses, a 7-Eleven, a laundry, a check cashing facility, a 99-cent store, 2-for-1 pizza, Alicia's Mexican food, and the Gold Cadillac Bar. I found no disruption or blockage of the driveway at Roscoe Boulevard. There was adequate parking within the larger project site. In addition, there is ample parking on Remit Street from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. There were approximately 30 mesh containers for patrons to put their cans and bottles into. There was no disruption or blockage of the driveway at Remit Avenue. 2 attendants were on duty. When they were not helping patrons, I witnessed them actively cleaning and sweeping the parking lot area. A large number of the patrons walked to the site. Costco and Home Depot are both nearby on Roscoe Boulevard, and a lot of patrons come from those 2 sites. During my time on the site, 2 large double-length beer trucks entered the site from Remit Avenue in order to deliver beer to the 7-Eleven and parked in the middle of the parking lot for at least 30 minutes at a time, prohibiting patrons from using 10 to 20 parking spaces. I found the operation to be a clean one. I was approached by a patron who told me that she comes to this specific site with her cans over other sites in the area because the attendants are very polite and helpful and because the site is clean. In conclusion, staff recommends that the committee deny the appeals and uphold the action of the City Planning Commission. I'm available for questions.
Thank you. Any questions for our staff? Seeing none. So who's representing the appellant? We have the appellant here with us. We can just understand the nature of your appeal.
Good afternoon, Councilman Reyes. John Perica for the appellants in this case. Councilman, for 20 years as a zoning administrator, I had a responsibility to you and the City Council to give you good technical advice on the code and my best judgment as to how to protect the quality of life in Los Angeles. I still had that responsibility to you and your committee. This particular case is built around a degree of deviation from the zone code that is staggering. Recycling uses generate a lot of adverse impacts. Traffic problems, health problems, noise problems. In this particular case, you have children playing around because there's a nearby apartment to this particular site. I'm going to help you understand with some pictures that I'm going to ask staff here to share with each of the members here. Once those are handed, I'm going to allude to some pictures because pictures will give you a much better feel for this. What the commission did is to deviate from the zone code that required 1,000-foot separation from the nearest residential use. They allowed a deviation of approximately 66 feet. That's a 93% reduction. They also waived the 6-foot block wall requirement as a noise buffer. They also waived the landscape requirements as well. This is a huge deviation from the code that allows the adverse impacts that you could imagine: breaking of glass, smells, odors, rodents, traffic congestion. There have been 2 accidents documented in the last year on the particular site. Again, children play in the area. About 3 weeks ago, a little girl just missed getting hit because the...
Please conclude. Try to summarize.
Two bins for the traffic area block visibility by cars going through there. You have an exhibit that was handed out to you, and I'm going to refer to you and let the speak. If you will turn to the tab marked Exhibit 2, you're going to see a series of pictures. It will show you, as an example, some of the auto accident pictures there as well. It'll show you vehicles blocking the driveway by parking and unloading right in the middle of the driveway. It'll show you the many homeless individuals there as well. We have documentation that I think clearly shows the degree of the problem that's been going on for years. This use was on the site. On the east side, it's asked to move 100 feet over with this conditional use approval. On the west side, that brings it closer to the residential apartments there. And Councilman Reyes, this is primarily a Latin apartment tenant here, and those people aren't here because of work commitments to be speaking before you. We think that as a compromise, it would be better to deny this request and have the use go back to the previous site that would be 100 feet further away from the residential uses, further away from some of the adjacent mini mall uses as well. The business could stay on site, but it would help the neighbors.
Thank you, Mr. Rica. Any questions for Mr. Rica? Okay, we'll move on to the next speaker. We do have Mr. Brand. Would you like to speak now or at the end? At the end, okay. So, anybody else with the appellant? With the appellant? Please come on up. Dave Hassan? Come on up, sir. Come on up. Give us your name and address.
My name is Steve Asil. I am president of the company called Hollywood Motors.
I'm sorry, you have to speak into the microphone.
My name is Steve Asil.
Okay.
I own Hollywood Motors adjacent to the recycling business.
Please give us your position.
I oppose this recycling center due to few facts.
Okay.
And since the recycling business moved next to our property, I lost of business at least 20%. The walking customers of mine, due to the smell and odors and crushing the bottles, was really disturbed, and they don't want to come in anymore. So mostly my business is with internet. So I lost most of my walking business. Second, they are adjacent to right next door to my entrance. Since they moved in there, and most of homeless people are moved in there, and we have all the pictures that you can see. They're sleeping right by my entrance. They're sleeping right behind that bins of recycling business. But the most important thing is I'm here to fight for my rights as a property owner, that my right says, according to section 12.21A, 18D, is to be 10 feet away from my property. And when these lawmakers making this law, they made it for a reason, to protect my property, due to maybe a fire, maybe something happened. Since they are right next to me, 4 or 5 people jump over the fence and went to my property and stole things out of my stuff. The second thing is also, when I mention is the code, it says 1,000 feet away from the residential area, and they are only 68 feet away. And they're not supposed to occupy more than 1,000 square feet by collecting bottles, and they occupying 1,300 square feet. My property was there for 50-some years with no fence around it. It was wide open, and entrances from each side. Now, they're also blocking my entrance to anybody come in.
Please finish, sir.
The most important thing I can say all is my business is hurt, although all the 7-Eleven and all the other businesses hurt. But the most important thing is they are 68 feet away from residential. And the kids coming to my place, I sell police motorcycle and cars. I work with motion picture, LAPD, sheriff, and LA County. I provide a motorcycle for their training purposes. They're coming to see. But all these kids coming with roller skate,
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
That's very dangerous. And really, you're going to get a lawsuit if something happens. Thank you.
Thank you. Jastar Singh Sama, is he going to speak?
Councilman Reyes, Mr. Jagtar Samar had asked me to speak in place of his time.
Well, we've already heard from you, and...
Well, there's information still to be presented, and he felt it would be easier for me to present.
Okay.
Thank you for your consideration. In the handout package that you have a petition with 368 names in it. These are basically people that work in the area, live in the area, or shop here. You also have 6 separate LAPD officer letters from people from the traffic section and from the patrol section whose responsibility was this site. All of them oppose this use at this site because the site is simply too small. If you look at the handout, you have yellow tabs at the top. those are 4 different out of the 6 officers who clearly have comments saying there have been problems with traffic congestion and accidents. It's not safe to have people taking recycling items back and forth across this. The use needs to move. The council position was originally in opposition to the request, and then they supported it. The assumption was it would be better to approve it because you could add conditions. Quite honestly, it's not the need to add more conditions, it's to enforce the conditions that are already there. The neighbors in opposition would gladly accept this use to be moved back further away because the problem issues, and let me give you an example. Breaking of glass violates a noise element. You don't need a new condition on noise because Building and Safety can enforce that. There are no toilets here. The State Welfare Commission can go ahead and enforce having the need for toilets. In other words, the council office justification to have the grant to get more conditions, there are a dozen very mild conditions that are part of the conditional use. They would not significantly improve the situation if the existing laws from county, state, and local were simply enforced for that. What we end up with is 368 people and their welfare. Would you want to live 66 feet from this noise versus the profit of one business?
Thank you, Mr. Baker. You're very thorough. Thank you very much. Okay, Mel Brown, and then Michael Amory. I will be deferring time, so you have a chance to speak after. Well, would you like to come to the microphone? Yes or no?
My name is Mel Brown. I'm the property owner in question where the recycling center is located. The 2 major complaints from Mr. Samra and Hollywood Motors are based, in fact, upon the circumstance that the site occupied by the recycling is taking up space where Hollywood Motors customers used to park on my property to access his property illegally and unwanted. Hollywood Motors also used that location to unload and load motorcycles and cars into his facility, also against my wishes and when I'm not around. Mr. Samra's objection is based on the congestion in the parking area, but as you heard from Mr. Scott, the congestion is caused primarily by loading and unloading of vehicles, beer trucks, Pepsi trucks, and container vehicles for the 7-Eleven store. The configuration is L-shaped. There is excess parking for all of the tenants in the center. There are public access toilets available in 2 locations. One is the laundromat facility, which has a coin-operated restroom facility. And Mr. Asile incorrectly told you that we are blocking his access. He has an easement right-of-way on the northwest corner of his property. It was a gas station, so people drove in that driveway to go into the gas station. It's no longer being used for that purpose. He uses that area to park cars. I've asked him to move them. He does when I come out and catch him, but that's the only easement he has. He has 3 other entrances to the location. I think that we have neighbor spite situations occurring here. And as so far as the property, the tenants in the apartment house, they also use this area as a parking lot overnight for themselves, and they don't want to see it abused. Thank you.
Thank you for that insight. Michael Emery, and then Dave Hassan. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, honorable members. My name is Michael Emery. I'm the owner of Cashty Recycling, and I'd like to address first the erroneous statement that was made that we should be within 1,000 feet of the residence. In fact, we should only be 100 feet away from the residence, not 1,000 feet, and that is clearly stated in the code. We have asked for a conditional use permit to relief of the 100 foot. We are currently 68 feet from the residential boundary, but however, we are actually 110 feet away from the residences itself, so we are meeting that, the spirit of that law. As far as Hollywood Motors claiming that they lost revenue, it seems that they need to be reminded that it is really the economy that is at fault more than anything else. Their gripe is simply because they used to park their cars in there, their customers used to are parking in there, they have no right to park in that property, and that's why they are upset. As far as blocking of the area, we have absolutely nothing to block the area. In fact, it is the delivery trucks for 7-Eleven that consistently block that area. They have been timed, and they spend anywhere from 45 minutes to 75 minutes, and that's what is happening there. As far as having letters from the police department, it's not really the police department. There are probably 3 or 4 people that signed for them. I don't believe they are active police officers. They are retired police officers, and therefore I submit to you respectfully that they should not be treated as police officers but private citizens, and that respects that's opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Dave Hassan?
My name's Dave Hassan, 20272 Via San Savino, Porter Ranch, California. I'm the consultant for the applicant of the recycling center. I concur with the staff report and accept a set of revised conditions which was presented and handed out to you. I'd like to also hand out a packet of supporting documents in favor of the project.
Just give it to the clerk. Yeah. Thank you.
For the sake of time, I know you have a busy schedule, I'm just going to read my presentation, so if you have any questions, feel free to call upon me.
Okay.
These conditions that I just handed out have been discussed and are acceptable both to the City Planning Department and the City Council Office. Contrary to what you might have heard in City Watch by the applicant, the Council Office delayed the plum hearing to hear the concerns of the Canoga Park Neighborhood Council Land Use Committee. The Council Office was notified 1 week prior to the scheduled plum hearing of April 20th. They reacted promptly to arrange for the Neighborhood Council to hear the project on April 22nd and arrange for delaying this plum hearing till today. No prior request from the Neighborhood Council was given to the Planning Department or the City Council Office, even though public hearings were held in July 2009 and Planning Commission in October 2009, and the appeals were filed in January 2010. In the spirit of cooperation, we presented to the Planning Department and the Council Office a revised and added conditions to address the Neighborhood Council concerns. We want to thank the Planning Department and Councilman Zine for their personal visit to the site to see firsthand the merits of our CUP request. I'd like to also point out that there is a carport area that blocks from the alley. There's carports that block, and then the apartments are still over 100 feet away.
So Councilmember Zine personally visited the site?
Yes, for over an hour. In fact, he addressed, and that was one of the recommendations of him, is to move the bins over to increase the drive aisle. And at the time, we didn't think it was necessary, but on the advice of and the concern of the Neighborhood Council to increase the drive aisle, we incorporated that into the revised conditions.
And you know, he's a former motor officer, correct?
Yes, in fact, he, during that visit, he had a lot of concerns about Hollywood Motors, but I don't want to go into that right now.
We won't go there.
Yeah, thank you. I ask for your recommendation for denial of the appeals and approval of the CUP with the added condition. Thank you very much. And I wanted to submit over 477 supporting.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Our last speaker is Jonathan Brand.
Good afternoon, Chairman Reyes, plum members. My name is Jonathan Brand. I'm with Councilman Dennis Zine's office. Councilman Zine disagrees with the appellant in this case and supports the Planning Department and the CPC's approval in this case. Mr. Zine personally investigated this site and believes that the already permitted location on this property is in a less desirable spot than where the buyback center is seeking permission to be situated today. At this location, the CUP will allow for conditions above and beyond what the code would require at the other location. In addition to the limited hours, there will be fencing and landscape throughout the whole property that currently has absolutely no green. Mr. Zine wants to proceed in this case because really any further delays will delay the most important conditions that really can't be implemented until the council rules on this CUP.
Okay. Any questions for the representative? Okay, seeing none. Mr. Scott? So we have conditions that were submitted. Have you reviewed the conditions?
Yes, I have, sir.
And given the nature of these conditions and your report, it's something we can absorb?
The Planning Department concurs with all of the additional 6 conditions.
So we can take the following action perhaps, and colleagues, any questions for our staff person on this one? No? So we could grant in part and deny in part, Madam Attorney, and so they can vote on these conditions. With the appeal filed by Steve Sale, Fire Motors, and Jack Tarsana, what would be the best approach?
Grant in part and deny in part, and add the additional condition.
Okay, so then relative to the decision of the planning commission improving the conditional use to allow recycling buyback center for the depositing of glass, cans, papers, plastic, beverage containers, and similar recyclable materials in the C2 zone located at 21616 West Roscoe Boulevard, subject to modified conditions of approval. That will be the action of this committee.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item, Representative?
The next item, council members, is item 11. It's an appeal by the Register Village Association. They're appealing the action of the Central APC, which approved a tract map for an 8-unit condo in CD10.
What item is this?
Okay, and item number, Roberto, again?
That would be 11, Councilman.
Item 11. So we don't have any speaker cards on this. We do, okay. All right. Okay, now staff.
Good afternoon. Latif Shalaba, City Planning. The case before you is a proposed vesting tentative tract for 8-unit residential condominium located in the Wesha Community Plan area. The site is currently developed with a 6-unit apartment building, which is proposed for demolition. There was a proposed interim control ordinance for an HPOZ ordinance number 179286, which was still in process when the tract application was filed. The ICO became effective on October 19, 2007. The application for the tract was filed on July 26, 2007. Subsequent to the Central Area Planning Commission determination, the Office of Historic Resources informed staff that a survey on the area for the proposed HPOZ has been completed and that the existing 6-unit on the subject site, which is proposed for demolition, has been listed as a contributing structure. The appeal before the council now is the appeal of the Windsor Village Association, which alleges that the environmental determination is inadequate because the environmental review does not address the impact of the demolition of the existing 6-unit building, which has an historical contributing status. Based on the new information provided to staff, as a result of the new survey that was completed in August of 2009 for the HPOZ, Staff recommended...
Sorry, based on what?
Based on the survey, there was a survey that was done by the Office of Historic Resources.
Okay.
Yeah. At that point, staff recommended to the Plum Committee back in September of 2009, to continue the hearing for a period of 90 days to allow the applicant to file for the environmental reconsideration in order to fully reassess the impact of the demolition of the existing 6 units on the site. Today, the applicant has not filed the environmental reconsideration. Staff has continuously tried to contact the applicant for over 90 days without any response from him, and it seems like the applicant has abandoned the project because even his representative also could not get any response from him. Staff therefore recommend that if the applicant or his representative is not here today, the Windsor Village Association appeal should be granted and recommend the denial of the project for lack of adequate environmental clearance.
So you are suggesting that we grant the appeal?
That's correct. Provide if the applicant representative is not here, or the applicant.
And the representative is not here today?
I'm not sure. I didn't.
Okay.
We never have any response from him.
Has the council office been involved in this discussion?
They had previously, but I believe they haven't got any response from them either.
Do we have anybody from District 10 here today on this item? Okay, all right. Okay, so we don't have the applicant. We're recommending denial. We can save ourselves some time and read the people on the record who are appealing, because I would follow that recommendation. I understand the district office would follow that recommendation as well.
You could do that, Terry Cochran, Messiah City Attorney's Office. You could give people the opportunity to speak, or if there isn't anybody in favor of the project and against the appeal, then maybe they choose not to. But an environmental impact issue was raised and the additional information wasn't provided, so I don't know how this committee could make a finding that the environmental clearance was adequate based on that.
So if we grant the appeal, I can thank Allison Supermore and Charles Doherty and R.J. Strutz, the appellant, and just let you know that we're going to support the appeal, and we can move on if you're okay with that. The 3 speakers I just identified, are you fine with that?
Yes.
Please say yes.
Yes, I am. Yes, I'm R.J. Strotz, representing Windsor Village Association, and we're perfectly fine with that.
Great. Very, very right.
Okay, thank
all right.
you.
That'll be the action of this
Just
committee.
on the record, we have been talking with the councilman's office, and they are supporting us. I just speed dialed Sylvia Lacey to see. They usually are here, and could be something going on.
So that'll be the recommendation of this committee?
Thank you.
That'll be the action of this committee, and thank you very much. Okay, our next item?
That will be item 12, council members. This is the appeal relative to the recycling facility in CD6. I think you closed the public hearing last week.
Right, we did. We closed public hearing. And we do have cards here, but let's hear from the staff. We had some questions that were outstanding, and for the record, we did get a letter from the council member in his position on this matter. Let's hear from the staff first, and then what I'd like to do is, since we already had the public hearing, well, let's hear from the staff first, and we'll take it one step at a time. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Frank Kwan. I was a hearing officer of the case. Basically, to reiterate, we had a request from the waste management company for the Bradley Waste Transfer Station and Recycling Facility. It went to commission. It was denied by commission and appealed by the applicant and their other 5 individuals in the community. That did appeal. Staff at the commission meeting did recommend approval. However, commission felt otherwise due to a couple of outstanding issues. So the denial, they rendered a decision of denial. The Plum members had questions at the last meeting, and I would like to address those, if I may, at this point very briefly. The first was what other agencies will regulate the project and covering of green waste facilities. I'm sorry, my glasses don't reach that far down. Basically, the green waste is regulated by the LA Municipal Code. The M2 section of the code requires that we have enclosed green waste facilities. The M3, however, allows unenclosed green waste facilities.
Thank you.
And that is clear by staff's definition and through another letter that was submitted to the City Council back when the plan amendment did go through for this very type of use. The other agencies that do regulate this use would include the local enforcement agency of the city and the California Integrated Waste Management Board, along with the Regional Water Quality Board and the South Coast AQMD. The LEA in this case does implement requirements of the state of California agencies. And in staff's conversations with the LEA, they also indicated that there is a possibility of covering the green waste. However, that has historically not been apparent in the past. Traditionally, it's believed that the state prefers to have the requirements made at the local agency level. In this case, if you wish to cover it, then there would have to be some reason or requirement in our municipal code or entitlement process to do so. Also, in particular with this site, the Bradley Green Waste Facility is under current lawsuit settlement, which stipulates certain operating requirements, which includes a system of misters and fence barriers to mitigate dust and odors. So that's what's currently required for the site in particular, and that is my answer to the first question. Question number 2 relates to whether or not a no-fly zone can be implemented over the residential areas to protect the residential areas from encroachment or drive-throughs by the rubbish and recycling trucks unnecessarily. Basically, the collection trucks that will enter the neighborhood should only enter to collect refuse and recyclables. Outbound trucks from the Bradley site should be trucking out raw materials to be recycled or to be trucked to landfills. In one of staff's former conditions in the conditions of approval recommended to the City Planning Commission, there was a condition number A16F which required that the approaching and departing trucks limit themselves to certain roads and highways surrounding the site. And those are listed in particular in that condition, which I believe can restrict truck access. However, I think it's advisable that the committee, if they desire to add additional language, and I think I wrote down that language for you on my notes here. It reads, approaching and departing trucks, including earth-moving trucks, shall not enter into residential zones for any reason other than to collect rubbish and recyclables, and be limited to the following public rights-of-ways in the immediate vicinity while en route to or from the subject property. And then there's a listing of certain roadways. So that would become a sort of a prohibitive measure or requirement indicating that these trucks should not be in residential zones. Otherwise, unless they were collecting rubbish and recyclables. Excuse me. Further, the applicant, should the applicant or their contracted users become these violators, then a condition of approval on the bottom of the page may be implemented with your action to limit or require fines for that type of action. Now, in reviewing what the applicants submitted, they did submit a letter from Armbruster and Goldsmith dated May 3rd, There is some language in there requiring penalties. The penalties are different from fines. The fines may be a difficult issue to put our fingers on at this point, so please consider what the applicant has prepared and submitted. I think what they're asking to do is prohibit or limit violators to 30 or 60-day suspension of privileges utilizing the
Bradley site. So that might be another way of
to reach the objective that was established by this committee to
yes.
So what they submitted reaches the same objective?
I believe so. The penalties are different, but I think it might be more appropriate in this case because really the users of the site would depend on the Bradley site to process their materials. And if they can't go there, they'd have to go elsewhere. I don't know if there would be other processing stations available in the future to do that. There are a few others in the area, but all of a sudden there would be a prohibition on that particular site.
Based on the letter that the councilman submitted, I just want to build upon the good work he's already established in trying to protect the neighborhood. So if it reaches the same objective and the council office is fine with it, then I'm okay with it too.
Okay, well,
anything else?
Council office. The third and final question that the Plum Committee had at the last meeting was how will which agency and how will third-party trucks be regulating and enforcing the air quality issue? And basically the State of California Air Resources Board, or CARB, regulations demand that the solid waste collection vehicles in this case be upgraded to meet their best available control technology standards. And by the end of December 2010, which is this year, supposedly all the solid waste collection vehicles, including models up to year 2006, will be upgraded and required to be 100% best available control technology compliant. So the state resources, California State Resources, Air Resources Board, would require full compliance in that situation. Now, what the applicant can do in this situation also is to require that their contracted trucks and other trucking companies, plus their own trucks, be compliant with the state CARB regulations. Further, the applicant has agreed to provide tipping or host fees to incentivize these third-party truckers to comply with these standards by reducing the fee for fully compliant trucks.
Okay.
So I hope those will answer your questions from last time.
I think the three outstanding questions were answered. And do you have any questions from my colleagues for our staff on this item? No? Any questions? Yes. A few questions, Councilman Wizard?
Thank you. The draft condition for the no-fly zone that you've provided, what's the enforcement mechanism for that?
Basically, the policers will probably be the residents of the neighborhood areas that are surrounding the site. And usually there's only 1 or maybe 2 days out of the week, if that waste trucks will enter the neighborhood and collect their recyclables or rubbish. So it's fairly obvious that if other trucks come in, they're probably in violation somehow. So call-ins by neighbors and the Department of Building and Safety, along with Planning Department, would be the enforcement side of the agency for these entitlements.
Building and Safety and who else?
And Planning Department would be contacted.
Well, I could see Building and Safety. The Planning Department probably doesn't have any
authority.
You want to consider it, police powers, but they do the planning up front. They don't typically don't go out there and do this type of stuff.
Terry Kaufman, the City Attorney's Office. That's correct. Building and Safety is the enforcement arm, but Planning Department could refer the matter to Building and Safety.
Okay. But in this matter, there's no third-party overseeing this, so we've set some regulations here. Your proposed draft here sets regulations, but really it would have to come through resident complaints. There's there's no real oversight by the city or anyone else. Is that correct?
There will be no full-time officer present to make sure compliance is made, if that's what your question is.
Okay. The agencies with regulatory oversight over the project, you listed here a number of agencies, and they do reporting that's required in the use of such facility, but in terms of the actual mitigation, the actual conditions that some of the residents and the community have raised, what I'm trying to say is the agencies, they would monitor this anyhow. It's not additional oversight. What do they check? What agencies and what actually do they look at when they oversee a facility such as this?
Well, if I recall, there was a monitoring condition, and all projects involving environmental mitigation with EIRs require a monitoring condition. I believe this one has a plan approval provision if the council would like to adopt the set of condition that staff had prepared previously. But that was...
It's a broad question, because I think, most of these other agencies kind of monitor these facilities as a matter of fact, and they do monitor the impacts on air quality, other health issues, but some of the issues that were actually raised by the local community, it's not an additional oversight. It's going to happen anyway, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So,
correct.
So to say that there's all this other additional oversight, it's really some of the issues that were raised are not directly, those agencies don't directly speak to those issues that were raised here locally. That's all for now.
Councilmember, any questions? Okay. Okay. All right. Let's see, no more questions. Since we already had the public hearing, out of respect to the fact that people have come again, we'll open up to 5 minutes on each side for a statement and or response or observation for the presentation given to this committee. So the applicant would like to do the first 5 and move on from there.
Thank you, Chair Reyes. Good afternoon, honorable committee members. Dale Goldsmith with the law firm of Armbruster, Goldsmith & Delvac, representing the applicant Waste Management. In the interest of time and the fact that there has been a public hearing, there are a number of speakers here today, but if I could just get them to stand up, those who are in support of the project. Rather than have testimony which might be duplicative, I just wanted to show that they'd come down to support this project and to request that you grant the appeal and approve the project. I'll be brief in my remarks. I did submit a letter yesterday to the Plum Committee. Hopefully you have a copy. It addressed the issues that you, Chair Reyes, had asked at the last Plum Committee hearing. One was a list of agencies with oversight. I counted that there were 17. And you're correct, Council Member Huizar, not every agency sees the project in total. Each has their specific area of expertise. For example, the Regional Water Quality Control Board addresses runoff and water issues. The CARB addresses the policing the truck fleet. The City Planning Department will enforce the mitigation monitoring measures and the conditions of approval that are imposed hopefully as part of this action in approving the project. In addition, the city attorney enforces the settlement that requires the misters and the state-of-the-art system. So there are a lot of agencies that touch on this, but primarily with respect to the issues of concern we've heard, it will be the Planning Department, and we will work closely with them to make sure that those conditions are adhered to strictly. With respect to the no-fly condition, we heard you, Chair Reyes. We think it's an excellent idea. I've attached to my letter a draft condition, which I think goes a little bit further than where staff went, because in addition to prohibiting use of residential streets, which we think is very important, except for those trucks that are picking up trash or recyclables, we're working on a detailed narrative and maps that will show them the routes. We will provide penalties. Those penalties can include 30 and 60-day suspensions, and in addition, if they're repeat violators, they'll be banned from the facility. And we think that's better than any sort of series of arbitrary fines, because not being able to do what they're doing is I think, the most powerful economic incentive. In addition, there'll be an emphasis on safe and defensive driving techniques, requirements with speed limits, additional signage to make sure that it's very clear the routes to and from the freeway that avoid the residential streets. On top of it, we will write into the contracts with those third-party contractors a provision, a contractual provision requiring that they force their drivers to stay off those residential streets unless they are there again picking up or dropping off garbage. In addition, we'll have a staff member posted by the Scale House to further educate and to urge compliance and to advise of penalties for noncompliance with respect to all the trucks, both the contracted trucks and the third-party trucks. So we think that will go a long way towards addressing the concerns that you articulated here. The third point that I raised related to the green waste, and I just want to clarify, because I think there was some confusion last time, that even though staff has determined that we do not need a variance for the green waste, to avoid any possibility of confusion, we're going to still seek the variance, and that way there'll be some conditions, some additional oversight authority on the part of the city. In addition, in my letter, I talk about the state-of-the-art odor control system. It's a multi-layered redundant system. It includes 6 misting lines with odor-eating enzymes to mitigate the odors. It includes 3 up to 23-foot screening fences, each one after the other, to help further reduce those odors. And as a result, in the last 2 years, because the SCA QMD monitors this, there were only 2 complaints. In 2009, there was a complaint about gnats, not odor, that were unrelated to the green waste system. And in addition, in 2008, there was a complaint which we believe, based on the direction of the wind of the day and the proximity, it was the other green waste facility that was causing that complaint and not this facility. So we have a demonstrated system that works. It's enforced by the SCA QMD, the LEA, and indeed even the zoning administrator, because we're doing the variance, could impose corrective conditions if for some reason it stops working. But we're convinced, based on a number of years of experience, it is state-of-the-art, it works, and it will continue to mitigate odors. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, sir. Like to hear from the opposing side? Anybody would like to? You can split it to 5 minutes, 2.5 if you like, 1 minute each, whatever you like.
You need how much, 1 minute? Okay, can I get 4 minutes?
No, if you get 4 minutes, you have 1.
Right, which he says is okay. Good afternoon, my name is Josh Stalick. I'm an attorney at Neighborhood Legal Services, the nonprofit legal aid program that serves the San Fernando Valley. I want to remind the Plum Committee about the environmental justice issues at stake here, because I think in talking about the particular concerns that Councilmember Reyes raised last week, it's important to remember that this is a predominantly Latino low-income neighborhood with nearly 50,000 residents and 10 elementary schools, yet it has 43 auto body shops, 33 auto dismantlers, 20 concrete and building materials facilities, 8 recycling centers, and now we're looking at placing one of the largest transfer stations in the city squarely in this neighborhood, and the cumulative impacts of all of these are immense. In addition, this particular facility will have significant and unavoidable air impacts, and will also contribute to significant cumulative air impacts. And while we appreciate the financial mitigations that have been offered, we believe the city must also require mitigations that will address the physical harms of this project on the community. With regard to the other regulatory agencies, I think Councilmember Weesaar hit it right on the head here, that those other agencies, including AQMD and the Integrated Waste Management Board and such, will exercise monitoring oversight, but it's the City Council here that's uniquely situated to set the parameters of operation of this facility and to require the mitigation that will reduce the physical impacts on the surrounding community. Moreover, other regulatory agencies such as the AQMD have raised concerns here that have not been addressed. The AQMD in its written comments on the EIR suggested or recommended enclosure of the green waste. The Bureau of Sanitation suggested additional analysis of the potential odor impacts, and so those concerns are still outstanding. We think there's a significant legal dispute here as to whether a variance is required for open-air green waste, and while we appreciate that Waste Management's now seeking such a variance, we don't believe the 5 requisite findings to grant a variance are present here. And this is an especially significant issue because of the history of nuisance odor on this site. Mr. Goldsmith referred to the AQMD lawsuit that was brought against Waste Management in response to community complaints about the green waste odor. And the Planning Department relies on that 2005 settlement as the mitigation to address a doubling of tonnage here, even though that mitigation was designed to only address the 1,200 tons per day that the facility was taking in 2005. With regard to the no-fly zone, we fully support that concept, but we do concur with the City Planning Commission here in terms of concerns about enforceability. I've looked at the language that Waste Management has submitted, and we are concerned that Waste Management essentially would be the arbiter of community concerns here and then the enforcer of any penalties in terms of their own, the parties that they contract with and that bring trucks to the facility. We're confident that the council could craft an effective enforcement mechanism, but we believe it would need to be a third party and particularly a public agency that should be the enforcer of any such no-fly zone. And we believe that should be a condition of any approval. So I want to close just by reiterating that this is a significant environmental justice issue. Sun Valley has borne more than its fair share of the city's trash, and if this project is to go forward, the city must require significant mitigation that will really address the physical impacts that this project will have on the surrounding community. Financial mitigations alone cannot redress the environmental justice issues here. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Right on the dot.
Good afternoon. My name is Mike O'Gara. I've lived there for 34 years in Sun Valley. Sun Valley is one of the most underserved communities in the city. No one has made a case that we need increased capacity for green waste. Besides, Waste Management wants to double their intake of green waste. We have another facility, Crown Disposal. They're going to increase their take of green waste. But they are mandated by the city attorney. They have to enclose their green waste. They must enclose the facility. This facility can be enclosed. There is a building target on Vineland and Victory in Mr. Krikorian's district that is built on a waste facility. There are 2 Home Depots in the north of California that are built on waste facilities. That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. That closes public comment. Please come on up. I know there's our representative from the city.
Yeah, Councilman Reyes, Alex Halou for the Bureau of Sanitation. I just want to clarify for the record that the Bureau of Sanitation did not submit anything about the emission that need to be done, as was mentioned a couple minutes ago. Just for the record, we did not make any recommendation about Waste Management doing emission testing or anything to that effect. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions from my colleagues on this, from the staff or anyone else?
Yeah, and it's just, I apologize, I wasn't here at the last hearing. I'm not sure if it was, some of my questions were asked then, but to the applicants, why not enclose the facility? I mean, you're enclosing part of it, but why not the rest of it?
Yeah, thank you. Once again, for the record, Dale Goldsmith representing Waste Management. There are a couple of different components here. First component is the transfer station material recycling facility. That's going to be built on, not on the landfill, but an actual solid foundation. It can be built. The trouble with the green waste, and it has been in operation for a while, is it's on, it's on trash. It's on the enclosed landfill. That trash settles constantly. And the building and safety has rigid requirements for seismic and non-seismic settlement for buildings and structures, and the tent would be a structure that human beings work in. There would be, in order to meet those requirements, we'd literally have to dig down into 40 feet of trash, pick it up, haul it out with all the attendant air quality and odor impacts, and then put proper soil on it, and then build on top of that. That would be financially infeasible, and the impacts on the community would be far greater than the non-existent impacts because of the state-of-the-art multi-layered misting system.
The letter by the Neighborhood Legal Services says that it would violate the Los Angeles Municipal Code if we do not enclose it. Is that?
I believe that's fiction. I know of no such requirement. We've not ever been advised of such a requirement. There is no requirement. And indeed, and I have a list that I can provide to you, we did a survey of 16 or 17 other facilities in the city, some of which is owned by the city, and not a single one was enclosed. And many of them don't have the state-of-the-art misting system that this project has, and indeed that will be part then of the conditions of approval should you grant the variance.
And I believe SQMD suggested enclosure in its EIR comments. Is that accurate?
I don't recall that comment, but the fact is it's not feasible. The EIR considered all the comments, responded to them adequately, and the city's EIR concluded that there would be no significant odor impact. The issue was extensively looked into, and the city's EIR concluded no impact because of the existing mitigation measures. Regarding the contention that a increase in the amount of material on site could add more odor, as I set forth in my letter, odor is a function of time on the ground. The longer you have green waste, the greater the likelihood it could begin, essentially fermenting and having odors. By the permit condition, all of the green waste has to be moved off within 48 hours, and most of it's moved off within 24 hours, again, treated continuously with the enzyme-eating odors so that there is no odor.
Okay. And you notice in your letter it says other similar facilities are not enclosed.
That's correct.
Are those other facilities, but you're telling me it's not feasible to enclose it?
It's not feasible on this site. For whatever reason, none of the other sites that we analyzed, that we looked into, were enclosed.
None of them were enclosed?
Including ones operated by the city of Los Angeles.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I do know, thank you, sir. Any other questions, councilors? Okay, we do have a representative from the council office. Like to come on up. And I do know you are familiar with the baby voices in the background, correct?
I'm sorry.
You're familiar with all the baby voices and
I'm actually quite distracted by them. I have a 14-month-old and
he just had a baby, so
I'm trying to hold babies, so and it's not because I'm running for public office. So
what are you running for?
I don't know. We'll leave it for another day. Council members, as the councilman's letter said, we've been at this for quite a while. We have labor supporting this. We've had community folks. We've been at it for a long time. And the no-fly zone is a great idea. Councilman asked us to start looking at that for the whole environmental justice zone as one of the things we want to do. I think it's an appropriate system to put into place, and I think the same questions we had about enforceability on it is one of those things that we're going to have to deal with in a time of budget constraints. We got to identify how we do that, but I think it's part of the record. It's a very important piece to all of this, and we really think that this has come a long ways. There's a lot of discussion about the enclosure of green waste. Council members, in order for something to be used on top of a landfill, you have to wait 30 years. That would require for us to be able to wait 30 years to do that. We have other landfills in the area that were city landfills. We have one site that we can't build a building today because of the landfill fingers that got out of the way. We didn't map it before very well. But to get down to this, it really became that it only sits there no more than 48 hours. That is the big issue, has misters, and that's why we came to the support of this project. I think the jobs that are on there, and again, I want to reiterate and thank the community members that sat on this CAC for the 7 long years and have continued to provide input and really tore this proposal apart. And so with that, I would ask for your support and ask you to approve the appeal with the conditions that were set forth. Thank you, and we're here if you need any questions answered. I just handed the conditional use permit and additional findings if you'd like a copy of those as well. We'd be more than willing to submit them. We have looked at this, we've worked on it a little too long, but we've worked on them for a while. All right, thank you.
Okay. So now, City Attorney, I want to make sure I phrase the action and following the cue of the council district. Since they did submit conditions, is it a deny and grant in part, or is it straight out?
Yes, with, and making revised findings, including the revised environmental findings.
So we're granting part and denying part of the 6 appeals filed relative to the decision of the Planning Commission disapproving a conditional use variance and site plan review for the construction and operation of a new enclosed transfer station materials recycling facility to receive, sort, consolidate, and prepare municipal solid waste and commercial residential recyclable materials for transport to other regional landfills and recycled materials processing facilities for properties located at 9227 North Tahong Avenue. Would that be accurate?
Yes.
Okay. Do I have a second on that? Yep.
Is that a second?
Yep.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'm just, does that include the draft no-fly zone regulations? And which one is it, the departments or the ones by the applicants?
I asked the department, and will the department come on up? I'm looking for the language that has the greatest capacity for implementation. Which version do we submit?
Frank Kwan with the Planning Department. I did submit that version. I believe is in yellow, highlighted in front of you.
Right, but the applicant's version, my understanding is has a greater capacity for implementation. Can council's office, have you seen both versions? Which one would you recommend? Because given the accountability issues will fall on your desk.
We would recommend the applicants. I think it goes a little further than what the staff had put together, simply because the penalties versus fines discussion, fines would take us a little bit or much longer to be able to come to what is a fair fine by what the state requires us to do for determining fines.
Okay, so Councilman, would that be something you'd be amenable to?
Yeah, I think, I mean, we do need an enforcement mechanism, and I understand that complaints, when complaints are generated, the appropriate agencies will respond. But in some of these circumstances, when people see a nuisance in their community, should there be one, sometimes people take it as, that's just the way neighborhood we live in. And I don't want to rely simply on complaints, but then again, if we add, this is the first time I read this, and if we add penalties to it, the operator would see that there would be some real consequences to their violation of increasing truck traffic in the local neighborhood. So I just read this right now, but I want to, between now and City Council, work with a local council officer perhaps to see what's the implication of having these penalties. It's a good step, I think, but I would prefer the applicants one instead of penalties.
That would be the recommendation.
I would agree as well. Trying to figure out the fine between now and council is a little bit of an impossibility.
Well, let's make sure they respond to it. That's what's important. Okay, so that would be the action of this committee. Seeing no other discussion, that concludes this item. All right, believe it or not, we're finished, guys. That looked like, is that it? Anybody here for anything else, Roberto?
Public comment.
Anybody here for public comment? Seeing none, I want to thank the babies and the moms for your patience. It was good sound background music for us. And have a great day. Thank you.